Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 to 23. But the Spirit produces love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, and self-control. There is no law against such as these. Today we will consider the spiritual fruit of love. What does it mean to love our country? We want to protect and develop our environment. We want to enjoy economic growth that is shared with every citizen. We want to see our people healthy and happy at home, work, and play. What else comes to your mind? What does it mean for you to love your constituents? Is it to try and find jobs for them? Is it to repair roads and signage and other infrastructural changes? Is it to deliver on promises made where at all possible? What else comes to your mind? What does it mean to love your family? Is it measured in the amount of time you spend at home, the amount of money you provide to feed, clothe, shelter, and educate them? Is it measured by the frequency and fervency of your prayers? What else comes to mind? What does it mean to love yourself? Leisure, pleasure, prayer, lifestyle, to name a few areas for consideration. What does it mean to love your God? Is it with all your heart and soul and mind and strength? Does it influence how you execute all the other levels of love mentioned? May we make this a new year of loving sincerely and with devotion like never before. Let us pray. Lord, teach us how to love in the true meaning of the word. Let us pray our family prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, when the business of this House suspended, we were on the order of business of communication by ministers. But before we proceed, I just want to thank all members for their full participation in our annual Parliamentary Church service, which was held at Wesley's Methodist Church on Blue Hill Road. We were moved to participate in the best interest of the Bahamas in a patriotic fashion by the message which was delivered by the chairman, the leader of the President of the Bahamas Christian Council, our President Delton Fernanda. And his theme was moving from good to great under the words and experiences of Nehemiah in chapter 6. I want to take this opportunity to thank the member for Marco City. Over the break, I had the opportunity to seek the assistance as the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village from the member for Marco City, who was the Minister of Agriculture. And while he was out of the jurisdiction, he made certain that officers of his ministry, and in particular BAMSI, were made available to the member for Nassau Village in launching its initiative in the Nassau Village constituency. That initiative is an initiative that we call in Nassau Village Sow and Grow. It's a Sow and Grow initiative in the Nassau Village constituency where we are launching backyard farming and community farming. And of course, on the flip side of the T-shirt, the theme is no root, no fruit. It is time for Bahamians to understand and appreciate that you don't get something for nothing, success without process, and plenty for a little bit. God didn't design it that way. And so publicly I want to thank Mr. Brennan, who is the CEO at BAMSI. I want to thank Andy Cartwright from the Ministry of Agriculture and Mr. Sho Cargill, who made such an excellent presentation on Thursday night last that the folks in Nassau Village did not want to go home. That's how excited, and I was so impressed. That was the best meeting in my term in office that we've had so far. And I want to thank you, Minister Pintard. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to give the Deputy Speaker the opportunity to give a brief overview on a report of his visit to Malta at the CPA Planning Committee. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to report respect to the meeting of the Standing Committee of the Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth, which was held in Valletta, Malta, from the 10th to the 11th of January 2019. Speaker, I thank you particularly because this was a meeting that you had asked me to represent you as the presiding officer of this honorable house, and it was indeed a pleasure to do so. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, I didn't intend to go through the entire report. I wish to table the report at the end, but I just wish to highlight just one or two areas for the honorable members of this house. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, to highlight that, to advise members that every 2 years the Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers meet from various national parliaments throughout the Commonwealth, and they discuss topics and rules and regulations as it relates to that committee, the CPA, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and they plan events, obviously the rules and regulations governing the association, and deal with any finances relating thereto. And so this particular meeting, Mr. Speaker, in Malta was held to address and plan the meeting which is scheduled next for Ottawa, Canada in 2020. Mr. Speaker, I must say at this point that there are 15 members from that represented the CPA, and with the exception of one country, Fiji, due to the death of the recent death of their speaker, it would have been very sad if we would have not been there. And I think that speaks to the importance of the Bahamas living up to its obligation when we do commit to these international committees. Mr. Speaker, on that note, I must say that the committee, upon the death of the Honorable Speaker for Fiji, we did instruct the committee to write a letter of condolences to the Parliament of Fiji, of which all members present, including the Bahamas, send its condolences on behalf of this honorable house and the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, this was an interesting seminar because we were able to, with your instructions obviously and your guidance, to present some of the topics that we would wish as the Bahamas to be listed on the topics for the conference next year in Canada. Particularly two topics, Mr. Speaker, that I know you're very passionate about. One being, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary privilege. We did discuss that and its importance, particularly making reference to the recent ruling of Justice Charles last year and a half, The second, Mr. Speaker, being the issue of the use of technology, both in this House and out of the House, as it relates to parliamentary procedures, as it relates to our services in the House. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that, notwithstanding the many, many topics that were suggested, our two topics were some way integrated in the 4 major topics to be discussed at that seminar. And so I think, Mr. Speaker, whoever represents the Bahamas, we would have that opportunity to have that discussions and to learn from the experiences of those other jurisdictions within the Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, I must also note that the topics, just for then concluding, the topics to be discussed, so members could maybe prepare themselves. Firstly, challenges around the displacement of a parliamentary assembly. And I say that because I hopefully, Mr. Speaker, before this term is out, I'm hoping that we'll be able to move from this historic place. But Canada is going through the experience where they're displaced. They're moving their parliament for a temporary period, so they're going to discuss that, and hopefully other territories will learn. The second one, information support for members in order to be an effective legislator. Security, as it relates to the individual members of parliament, their staff, and their members of their family. Special focus on cyber security and harassment. And fourthly, Mr. Speaker, openness and transparency, public engagement, how technology supports openness and transparency. Mr. Speaker, I must say that indeed this trip was an enjoyable one. There was a lot of exchange between various parliamentarians, particularly speakers, whereby we were able to learn from each other. I just wish, Mr. Speaker, to note that we were encouraged, Mr. Speaker, to attend the next meetings of the CPA, particularly the 44th CPA Caribbean, Americas, and Atlantic Region Conference, which is going to be held in Trinidad, the 12th to the 17th of July 2019. That is the regional conference for this area. And I must note, Mr. Speaker, that the Bahamas and Belize represented this particular region, the Caribbean, Americas, and the Atlantic region at this particular conference. And so they're encouraging us to make sure and be there in Trinidad. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the 64th CPC annual conference, which will be held in Uganda from the 22nd to the 29th of September 2019. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would wish to table this full report whereby members would be able to have an opportunity to see in more detail what transpired. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to represent this Honorable House in Malta a few weeks ago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table.
Thank you, Mr.
Honorable members, I understand that there may be a desire to go back onto the business agenda.
Yes,
Chair
thank you.
recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me beg your indulgence for having breached parliamentary protocol and moving when you were speaking, but I needed to get an agreement from the other side for us to go back on the agenda. The other side has agreed that we can go back on the agenda to laying of documents by ministers because there's a number of documents we would need to table.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for Mangrove P, South and Central Andrews.
We have no difficulty, Mr. Speaker. That's one the member for Bamboo Town, leader of government business, to note, instead of saying the other side, Her Majesty's loyal opposition. We
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. So we will proceed at item 5 on the order of business, laying of documents by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the business license amendment of First Scheduled Order 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order Order that the document would lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Financial Intelligence Unit Designation of Foreign Financial Intelligence Units Order 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, Appointed Day Notice 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document will lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Removal of Preferential Exemptions Act 2018, Appointed Day Notice 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act 2018, Appointed Day Notice 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Act, Chapter 362, the Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2018, Bahamas Registered Stocks 2021, 2023, 2025, 2028, 2038, and 2048.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House Bahamas Registered Stock Act, Chapter 362, Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2019, Bahamas Registered Stock 2022, 2024, 2026, 2029, 2039, and 2049.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Holidays Boxing Day 2018 Opening of Shops Notice 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Holidays New Year's Day 2019 Opening of Shop Notice 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Holidays Majority Rule Day 2019 Shop Opening Notice 2019.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Education Loan Authority Audit Financial Statements for the year ending June 30th, 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
There are no further laying of documents.
Statements and communications by ministers. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petition. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills.
No first reading.
Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I do believe that we laid in the House this resolution before. You should have the resolution for the Treasurer of the Bahamas to convey to the Minister of Housing a tract of land, Roma Street, for the purposes of the development of a subdivision.
Just a moment, honorable member.
I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, honorable member, you may continue.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So if that may be regarded as tabled, then I would like, with your leave, to move to bring a communication on the resolution to convey 1.267 acres of land situated in the southwest junction of Roma Street and Umbrista Street to the minister responsible for housing for the sale of service lots. If not, I can read the resolution. Read the resolution. I'm being instructed to read the resolution, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, honorable member. And just for the record, that resolution was tabled on the 21st, is number 18, tabled on the 21st of November 2018.
And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you could appreciate, and all the other former practicing counsel, that we enjoy our instructions and we shall follow them. Mr. Speaker, I begin. Entitled Resolutions. Whereas the Treasurer of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Treasurer, a corporation sole established under Section 4, Subsection 1 of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, Statute Law of the Bahamas, the Act, is seized in fee simple in trust for Her Majesty in right of her government and of the said Commonwealth for public purposes of the hereditaments described in the schedule hereto, the hereditaments. And whereas the Treasurer has agreed to sell, and the Minister responsible for housing, a corporation sole established under Section 3 of the Housing Act, Chapter 199, Statute Law of the Bahamas, the purchaser has agreed to buy the hereditaments containing by ad measurement 1 267/100 acres for an estate in fee simple, in possession for the nominal sum of $10 in the currency of the Commonwealth, the currency. And whereas, by Section 5, Subsection 3A of the Act, the Treasurer shall not sell or make any other disposition of the fee simple of any land vested in her without the prior approval of both Houses of Parliament, signified by resolution thereof, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to Section 5, subsection 3A of the Act, this House approves the conveyance by the Treasurer to the purchaser of the hereditaments for the nominal sum of $10 in the currency. The schedule hereinbefore referred to, area equal 1.267 acres, all that piece, parcel, or lot of land containing by ad measurement 1 267 hundredths acres or thereabouts, as shown on a plan 2637 NP on record in the Department of Lands and Surveys, situate at the southwest junction of Roma Street and Ambrista Street, formerly known as Reeves Street, in the island of New Providence in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Abutting and bounding towards the north by Roma Street, towards the east by Ambrista Street, towards the south, partly by land now or formerly the property of the Ministry of Housing, and partly by land said to be the property of Mr. Sylvester Smith. Towards the west, partly by land said to be the property of one Mr. Wallace, and partly by a 10-foot wide road reservation, or however else the same may abut and bound, which said piece, parcel, or lot of land is more particularly delineated and shown colored pink on the plan or the area hereto annexed and marked. Mr. Speaker, that is the resolution. And so at this juncture, I'd like to bring a communication in relation to this resolution, Mr. Speaker. Debate? Oh boy. They're telling me to talk, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, you are moving a motion that the resolution be agreed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So now we proceed to the debate, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, proceed.
All right. I just want to be clear. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity for me to make my contribution to the resolution for the conveyance of 1.267 acres of land situated at the southwest junction of Roma Street and Ambrista Street to the Minister responsible for housing to be used for the sale of service lots. Mr. Speaker, before I begin, I would like to wish, first of all of my colleagues in the House of Assembly and all my parliamentary colleagues and all the citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas a very happy New Year. May it be safe and prosperous. I'd also like to wish the constituents of Marathon, the constituency for which I represent, and I am humbled to represent, a very special and happy New Year. And in that vein, Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I would like to wish the following persons: Mildred Knowles, Stacy Meadows Clark, Malika Pierre, Genevieve Albury, Yolanda Bain, Carlton McPhee, Veronica Clark, Mimos Petit Frere, Carla Pratt, Jawad Hanna, Adeline Charles, Ari Hepburn, Francisco Chandler, Norman Palacios, Bernadette Bodie, Jerry Ramming, Krista Josephs, Christine Dorset, Francisco Smith, and Charles Pierre, a very, very, very happy birthday. Very happy birthday. Mr. Speaker, in Marathon, we are a family, and we keep ourselves appraised of the ongoings of each other. And I'm actually very humbled. I consider it a distinct privilege to serve in this honorable place, and it's not something that I take for granted. Every time I walk up those stairs, I feel honored to be here and to serve, Mr. Speaker. So I wish them a safe and prosperous New Year. Godspeed to them all. Mr. Speaker, I also would like, because of what I believe is the word that I like to use, the historicity of this moment, I'd also like to recognize and say again into the record that I am so grateful for the contribution of my grandfather, Arnold Joseph Kemp, who served in this honorable house in 1933 for the Exuma District, who was born in Masons Bay, Ackland, and after whom Kemp Road is named after. Arnold Joseph Kemp. I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and very proud of my lineage. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to fulfilling its mandate to continue the development of new government subdivisions in the Bahamas. These subdivisions are developed with the sole purpose, Mr. Speaker, with the singular purpose in mind to address the unmet demand for affordable housing in this country. We believe that this is a dire situation, that there are thousands and thousands of Bahamians that have unmet needs when it comes to the provision of housing. The old way of doing business, Mr. Speaker, has ceased. Mr. Speaker, when we came to office, we met subdivisions in place, one in particular, and I want to explain why, so the Bahamian public can be very clear why the old way of business could not go on, why the old way of business as practiced under the Christie Davis administration could not go on. Because we met a subdivision in place where, based on the appraised value, Mr. Speaker, and this is why it's important, the houses were overpriced by between $13,980 and $18,650, Mr. Speaker, and no one in their right mind wants to pay more for something. No one. Whether it's a house, whether it's a conch snap, or whether it's a conch salad. Nobody. So, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Housing made a decision that we will no longer build houses. Today, Mr. Speaker, the department focuses on installing the necessary infrastructure on undeveloped land to produce residential service lots. These lots are priced at a low cost, making them affordable for first-time homeowners in New Providence and the Family Islands. As announced before, Mr. Speaker, property owners will be responsible for building their own homes. They can utilize pre-existing housing plans offered by the Department of Housing. They can utilize their own plans, their own architect, their own contractor. Mr. Speaker, on the 12th of July 2018, the Service Lots Initiative was successfully launched when the first phase of the initiative was rolled out at the Sunset Close subdivision. This Service Lots Initiative gave Bahamians who ordinarily would not be able to afford a home of their own access to affordable housing. The lots in Sunset Close have been sold for under $20,000. That's under $20,000. So I just want the Bahamian public and my colleagues to let that sink in, because we're talking about a New Providence setting. We're talking about being a landowner for under $20,000. Mr. Speaker, those lots were sold to the average Bahamian, whether they be police officers, fence force officers, customs officers, teachers, and in some cases, mortgages have been approved for the construction of homes. After the successful rollout of the Sunset Close service lots, we promised that lots will be available soon in the Lionel Davis subdivision. And Mr. Speaker, unlike the promises made by the Christie Davis administration, this administration is here standing delivering on promises made, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, yes, talk.
Mr. Speaker, I now present to this honorable House a resolution to approve the conveyance by the Treasurer to the Minister responsible for housing of 1.267 acres of land in Fox Hill, which will be developed for sale of serviced lots. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to give you some more information on the land in the Fox Hill area. First of all, 1.267 acres of land is situated on the southern side of Roma Street and on the western side of Bristol Street, formerly known as Reeves Street in New Providence. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Fox Hill area, all you need to do is think, when you're coming down the hill from St. Anne's Church and you pass Tony's Jerk on the right, look to the left, and you'll see the Church of God of Prophecy up in that area there. The Ministry of Environment and Housing began preliminary work on this property in early 2014. Those works included the initial clearing of the property, surveying of the proposed site, and a design for a small subdivision comprising of 10 lots. On the 14th of July 2016, this 1.267 acres of land became the property of the government of the Bahamas by a declaration of vesting. It was subsequently vested in the Treasurer of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for a public purpose. And we could think of no more noble public purpose than the provision of housing for our fellow citizens, Mr. Speaker. And it was to be held in trust for the Bahamian people. Upon the approval of a subdivision design, the subdivision was then known as the Lionel Davis subdivision. Mr. Speaker, this subdivision pays tribute to the late Lionel Davis, a legend in Fox Hill. And if there are any Fox Hillians or anybody associated with Fox Hill in the audience today or in the listening audience, Lionel Davis is well known. But I must talk a little bit about Lionel Davis on an occasion such as this. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Davis was a member of Parliament for the Fox Hill constituency from 1968 to 1977. During his tenure, Mr. Speaker, the Fox Hill Festival got its start. Consequently, Mr. Davis is credited as one of the founding members of the modern-day Fox Hill Festival. We are certainly pleased to have this subdivision named after this Fox Hill man. First, because Mr. Davis is a Bahamian. Secondly, because of his fine contribution to the history of Fox Hill, an evolving community that retains its old world charm while adapting to the modern way of life. And let us not forget, Mr. Speaker, that Fox Hill is one of 3 communities on New Providence that was founded by liberated Africans whose descendants never knew slavery and were intercepted on the high seas by Her Majesty's Royal Navy and brought here, the other 2 being Adelaide and Gambia. So there is definitely history in Fox Hill. Mr. Speaker, the service lots and Lionel Davis subdivision immediately become a part of the government of the Bahamas' new Access to Affordable Homes program. Therefore, the lots are now ready for sale. After purchasing one of these lots, the Access to Affordable Homes Act 2018 gives the Bahamian landowner the right to apply to the Ministry of Finance for exemptions from customs duties and excise tax on all materials necessary to construct a single family dwelling home. Mr. Speaker, I wish to put the general public on notice that we expect these lots to move quickly. As a matter of fact, we have a list of persons already waiting to purchase them. But Mr. Speaker, I don't want anyone listening to me to be discouraged. we will not run out of service lots. It's important to note that the administration fully understands the need for affordable housing in the Bahamas. The reality is that there are many, many persons today who really wish to own their own homes, but simply cannot afford to purchase property. Such an initiative will now permit eligible persons to purchase service lots at reasonable rates. And this is an initiative where we will wipe every tear from every eye of every person that seeks to purchase a service lot. Thank you so much for that, Angus. Mr. Speaker, it is noteworthy, Mr. Speaker, that the general public understands the Affordable Housing Initiative. And they understand that it now requires homeowners to be energy efficient. As a result, each homeowner is expected to install a solar water heater or a minimum of a 2 kW photovoltaic solar system that is required to be registered with the Renewable Energy Generation Program at Bahamas Power and Light. Mr. Speaker, the Minister's administration is serious about renewable energy. The Ministry of Environment and Housing is serious about renewable energy. Bahamas Power and Light is serious about renewable energy. And we will continue to encourage Bahamians to solarize their homes to save on energy costs. After all, the Tropic of Cancer runs through the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. In addition to these energy-saving measures, Mr. Speaker, for the first time, homeowners will be able to construct a split-level single-family residence in a government subdivision. Yes, property ownership in a government subdivision now gives homeowners the flexibility to build two-story houses if they desire. And as my lineage, as I said from the beginning, hails from Acklands, and I know Engliston's lineage hails from Acklands, and we know our people down south have a propensity for split-level homes. We both know that they will avail themselves of this particular change in policy. Mr. Speaker, striving further to reach our goals, the Department of Housing has identified properties for subdivision development in Abaco, namely Central Pines, Andros, Breezy Hill Subdivision, San Salvador, and New Providence, Carmichael Village. So when I said, Mr. Speaker, when I said not to worry, we won't run out, it is anticipated that when we finish the Carmichael Village subdivision, government subdivision, which is off Carmichael Road, we will have in excess coming on stream of 370 service lots available for the average Bahamian. 370. Available for $30,000 or less. So, Mr. Speaker, I know, like, for some persons in the Family Islands, they may not have, especially if they've never been to New Providence, they may not have a full appreciation for that. But everybody who lives in New Providence knows that to buy a lot in New Providence for under $30,000 is a deal, a steal of a deal. But the most important thing I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is I want to encourage young people that, and any person that qualifies for this, young or not so young, that this is really the opportunity of a lifetime. So if you've been waiting to purchase a home, don't wait any longer, apply. Something like this is not going, it hasn't happened for a very long time before and is not going to happen for a very long time. This is that moment. We encourage you all to apply and take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. All Bahamians, take advantage of it, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, we haven't forgotten our brothers and sisters in the Family Islands. We mentioned Abaco, and I want to emphasize Abaco, Andros, San Salvador. We will be moving through the entire family of islands, making these opportunities available where the land is available to all Bahamians, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to give you an update in Abaco surveying works are being carried out for the extension of the Central Pines subdivision, where an additional 60 residential service lots are being prepared for sale later this year. That's 60, Mr. Speaker, and that's in Abaco. Mr. Speaker, an occupational survey is being carried out in Crossing Rocks, which is expected to be completed at the end of this month. This survey will help the department to issue deeds to the residents of Crossing Rocks, some of whom have been waiting. Actually, they waited the entire time of the Christie Davis administration, and they're still waiting, but we are determined to put deeds in their hands for the property owners in Crossing Rocks. And this is of special significance to me. My wife was born in Crossing Rocks, Mr. Speaker. Special significance to me. And I got to go home. So I want to say, for the record, that we are very determined to provide housing for all Bahamians. I say some of these things tongue-in-cheek, but it underlies the determination of this administration to provide housing for all Bahamians throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, affordable housing is important to Bahamian families. It not only fulfills a basic human need for shelter, but it also contributes to the well-being of both parents and children. And for this reason, it is important for the government to give access to affordable housing to as many Bahamians as possible. Our vision is that these communities will eventually house a wide cross-section of persons: straw vendors, taxi cab drivers, hotel workers, officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force and Defense Force, nurses, teachers, and many, many other professionals. Bahamians who have contributed greatly to the development of this country. It is the determination of this Minister's administration to ensure that opportunity exists for all who can afford to realize the dream of home ownership. Mr. Speaker, it is now with immense pride and gratitude that I move that the resolution for the conveyance of 12.87 acres of land situated at the southwest junction of Roma Street and Ambrista Street to the Minister responsible for housing for the development of the Lionel Davis subdivision and the sale of service lots be adopted, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamacraw.
Yes, please. Thank you. I don't see that again. Mr. Speaker, let me first say it's a delight and indeed a distinguished pleasure to stand in this ancient and honorable place to second the resolution in this debate, Mr. Speaker, for the transfer of all that piece, parcel, and lot of land situated in Fox Hill for the purpose of guaranteeing to Bahamians, or living up to a promise made by the Minister administration to provide not just affordable homes, Mr. Speaker, but to change what was the nomenclature or the culture in the Bahamas of land. But Mr. Speaker, as always, I crave your indulgence just to make mention of one or two notices. First, Mr. Speaker, I would like to, on behalf of my family and I, and most certainly the great constituency of Yamacraw, to first bring New Year's greetings to all of my colleagues here in this ancient and honorable place, in particular the constituency of Yamacraw, and indeed the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, a family that's near and dear to me has lost a loved one. And that is the Josie family, and I'm quite certain that almost everybody in the Bahamas especially in the Royal Bahamas Police Force, would know, and in the Christian community, would know Bishop Arnold Josie, a man that I love, respect, and admire. His brother, Franklin Josie, who is another gentleman or member of the family that I love, respect, and admire. And I must admit, publicly, he's one of my trusted generals. And so I would like to extend condolences to the family and say to them that the prayers, my prayers, the prayers of my family, the prayers of the Yamacraw community are with them. And I pray that God will continue to strengthen and bless them while they go through this time of their bereavement. I'd also like to make mention that the Eastern Community Spring Festival, we're just getting it in early, it's coming up on the 30th of March in the Yamacraw constituency. And I'm a cultural man. I'm from Cat Island. And I'm not trying here to take a jump on my cousin, Cat Island Rumkins in Salvador. But the Rake and Scrape Festival, and I'm quite certain that he will speak to it, comes up in June. And so I'm quite certain every month I will remind the Bahamas, and we're going to remind the world, and I'm quite certain he's going to do it, that Cat Island will be the place to hear all of those nice songs, to eat some good food, you know, to drink some coconut water. And as Pompey from Bohog and the Roosters would say, you can come in here why someone left the Bohog for the little pig. And so I encourage you to come to Cat Island and have a good time. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not make mention of a lady who graced this ancient and honorable house. And she's in the person of the Honorable Janet Bostwick. St. James Palace in London has formally announced the Queen's honors, Mr. Speaker. And the Honorable Mrs. Janet Bostwick, who was a first in a number of things in this country, the first woman parliamentarian, the first lady to act as Prime Minister in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. She led the charge, Mr. Speaker, for some of our most vulnerable, and that's the children of the Bahamas. And because of her efforts and the efforts of women in this country, we were able to enjoy the passing of the Status of Children's Act under the Ingram administration and the Inheritance Act. She has done a lot for this country, and she isn't finished yet, because she's a lady of great gigosity and ambition. And I will leave that there. Gigosity. and ambition. And so, I leave that there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I now return to this resolution. The resolution, Mr. Speaker, to recognize what is an innate need, Mr. Speaker, of the human person, and that is dwelling. And I know that our master recognized this when he says, and I don't want to misquote him, but he makes mention of the foxes having holes, that he had nowhere to lay his head. And he recognized the need for a home, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, when through the speech from the throne, Mr. Speaker, and I will just pause at this and I will return to it, when the Dame Marguerite Finland, the Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, on Wednesday, 24th May 2017 at 10 a.m., when she, in her own eloquent and articulate and distinguished manner, read the speech from the throne, Mr. Speaker. And on page 16, she says, all Bahamians are entitled to an acceptable standard of living ready access to essential services, and livable physical environment. She goes on. My government will enact legislation to provide a program to facilitate home ownership. We will continue the development of new government housing subdivisions to address unmet demands for truly affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, I would leave that there, and I shall return to it. Because every time I have the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to speak to land, it is very important, if we understand or we can appreciate where we want to go, that we have a deep, ingrained appreciation from whence we have come. And when I last spoke, delivering the white paper, which I was instructed to do by my Honorable Prime Minister, I went down memory lane, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that some of the, well, they're in schools now and that they would watch it this evening. But there was a time when, you know, you had the old and the new world cut in half by the church. Ownership was given to one group. And as you travel through time, I'm going to bring us up quickly. There were certain groupings from Europe that take possession of certain lands. And they say, all is mine. After they put their flags down, determining what would be theirs, what would be the resources, the people's, hurt, shame, and embarrassment, I guess that's what makes us so strong. We come, I'll take us straight up to the 60s, where we know that land in the Bahamas, three persons when they first came to this house did not take payment. They divided it, land. The original persons who were here, well, they took all from them. They didn't have any. But there were those who, when they first came to this ancient and honorable place, there's a reason why they didn't take payment, because everything was theirs. And so land was used as a means, and still is, of empowerment, success, recognition, self-determination. Mr. Speaker, land in this country was used at one stage to guarantee you so many votes. So, if you had 13 or 14 pieces, you had 13 or 14 votes. "13 or 14 votes. And as I said then, I will say now, I do recall as a young boy coming from Cat Island, my father would always tell me the story about the old ladies on Cat Island. And at one time when I met Mr. Arthur Dion Hanna Jr., I was privileged for him to give me instructions to go and speak to Mr. A.D. Hanna, the former Attorney General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. He says, go on him and speak to him about that Cat Island case. If you want to appreciate the whole conditioning of land and how we were treated because of land. And I did have that discussion. But Mr. Speaker, not only did our forefathers or our history echo the sad state or disposition of land that is recognized by the administration, the courts in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the courts are lead court, the Privy Council. And we just recently saw that in Dennis Dane and Arwak Home, Mr. Speaker, where it lamented the state or the structure of land in the Bahamas. Foreign persons who attempt to purchase land in the Bahamas, their embassies have made representations. I know at one stage I was the president of the Bahamas Bar Association. Good title. And you're an attorney and you understand what the importance of good title. You're in Nassau Village, which borders the Linden Estates, the Linden Pinland Estates, and I will get there, Mr. Speaker, where in some instances there was no subdivision or proper subdivision approval, or even where there was subdivision approval, persons did not own the title to land. And one of the things this government has identified is it understands this history, Mr. Speaker, in trying to pass the Bahamians good and marketable titles in land. And so, as I said, the Privy Council identified the difficulties. More recently, a justice of the appeal, a court of appeal in the Bahamas, when speaking to the condition of land, said that she was concerned in granting titles to land under the Quieting of Titles Act as to whether or not the court would be an unwitting participant in a fraud. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated before, and I said that I would come back to it, in the speech from the throne, in the speech from the throne, the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the minister-led government, recognized the need to bring not just stability, but transparency to the transferred lands in the Bahamas. So, Mr. Speaker, on April 11th, 2018, a white paper was laid, Mr. Speaker, in this honorable House, outlining this administration's intent to bring regularity and transparency to land in the Bahamas, something that was started, Mr. Speaker, by the UBP. And there was draft legislation to bring into place a proper land registration where poor people, rich people could all have a structure in the Bahamas where they know who have title. And the reason why this is so near and dear to me, Mr. Speaker, is I'm from Cat Island. I know of instances where persons decide that they're going to quiet hundreds of acres. And the poor person sometimes don't even get the notice that their property is being quieted. And when they do find out, they don't have the resources to withstand the legal onslaught on seeing to withstand the onslaught that is approaching. No, I hear South. I just want to say something. Mr. Speaker, the only resource I need for any election is to make sure that my call in an election is sure. And so, from I was a young boy on Cat Island, my grandmother taught me how that is accomplished. You get on your knees, and you ensure that the gentleman, the great God that created everything, who has the ability to channel things to you, that you're in his favor. Thank you very much. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. But Mr. Speaker, 11th April 2018. Don't mind what they say, Mr. Speaker. Don't mind what they say. 11th April 2018. And with your leave, Mr. Speaker, I shall read a portion of the presentation made on that day. With your leave, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am privileged to announce to this House.
Honorable member,
sir,
whose presentation are you reading?
The document is Communications to the Honorable House of Assembly by the Honorable Ellsworth Johnson, MP.
Oh,
carry on. Your presentation? And laid on the floor of the House. Yes. Yes.
You take intellectual property rights very seriously over here.
I am privileged to announce to this House that the government has decided to move with expedition to prepare a formal white paper and thereafter to commence widespread consultation with the public throughout the Bahamas on the urgent need for land reform to address the thorny issue of the provision of good title to land the creation of a national system of land registration in a standalone registry. The ability for all claims and charges affecting title to every lot or tract of land in the Bahamas to be registered in the charges register, and the accurate circulation of the full extent of Crown land and the specific location of every tract of land. Mr. Speaker, this is phenomenal. And in the words of a gentleman, and in the words of a gentleman, I don't always agree with him. But I do recall when I was about to make certain steps, his good advice brought me success.
And he would say,
this is powerful.
I'll
leave that right there. Yeah. But Mr. Speaker, one would get, after what I've have in regard to the aforementioned, we're now brought to where we are in terms of the resolution today and what is being, not attempted, what is being done by the Minister administration. I've outlined how persons just took all of the land. Then there were individuals that separated among themselves. And then how it was used to abuse, destitute, and undermine a constitutional process called the first past the post. And the recognition that humanly it was unlawful and unconscionable. And the understanding that today we have an obligation to deal with it. And Mr. Speaker, you know, we have had majority rule for quite some time now. And I want to commend, it would be remiss of me if I don't commend. There was a Minister of State, or Minister in the person of Mr. Barron Woodside. He was a member of the Hubert Ingram administration who first laid the bill, Mr. Speaker. And that is in 2010, the Ingram administration prepared several bills, namely the Law of Property Bill 2010, the Registered Land Bill 2010, and the Land Adjudication Bill 2010, Mr. Speaker, with the objective of bringing regularity, transparency, and accountability to land distribution in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I will bind for that myself. Yes.
You like that?
Because it's not just a talk, Mr. Speaker. And what I want to do is commend the Honorable most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, absolutely, for creating a deliverables unit who is assiduously working on the process of land regularization in the Bahamas, because it's a very important part of the ease of doing business. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a recognition of, and everybody in this House, and everywhere in the Bahamas I know can attest to people who say they got generation property.
This one's for the poor.
My family says that. We have generation property.
They've taken them.
And there's been land experts on this side and on that side for years. And they fully appreciated that the disposition of land in the Bahamas operated to work an inhuman injustice, especially the people of color. Don't mind people tell you about how much they love you. And black, black, black.
Our single mothers can help you.
I love that, yeah. And black, black, black. But it's what you do. And you see the recognition of this. To say to people with generation property, to say to those people in Linden, Pinland Estates, or Bozane Town, that we can make it right. But not only to say to them, but to say to Bahamians now, and to Bahamians in the future, that this is what we have to do if we want to correct a social and historical wrong. So, Mr. Speaker, you see the and don't mind persons saying that we haven't done anything. And when I last spoke to this, I will tell you, there are persons on this side who's upset that there's regulation being brought to this, and there are persons on that side who are upset that the Minister administration had the audacity to do something that is right, that will affect all and every Bahamian. And so I would just like, you know, we've had a town meeting in Yamakra on this. We're preparing to go to Eleuthera to do the very same thing. I would like to invite everybody under the sound of my voice to look at this, because there are forces militating against this that don't want to see this happen. But it needs to happen, and it shall happen. Because every time I have the opportunity, I remember those old ladies from Old Bite Island. I remember that my grandmother was described in an action before the Supreme Court as a sharecropper. I will remember that. Because if she was described as a sharecropper, I was the little boy who was there with her. And so I never saw her share any of her crops. And that's how relevant and recent it is. And Mr. Speaker, we're living in these times. And a baton was given to us, Mr. Speaker, for this day, to do this very same thing. So I congratulate the Honorable Arthur Dion Hanna Senior, his son. When I saw you said, what, no roots, no fruit?
No fruit.
I thought about Mr. Hanna, he said, no roots, no fruit. I'm quite certain that he's listening to it where he is in London. But this is a rich day for us, Mr. Speaker, and I would invite the media. This is a fitting story to go throughout the island, to highlight the injustices that have occurred over the years, to speak with some of the retired judges, to speak with some of the retired persons who fought year in and year out to assist persons in land matters. And so this is where we've come, Mr. Speaker. I crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to say that we already know that former Justice of Appeal, Dame Anita Allen, has been appointed as Law Reform Commissioner on a part of that process, and I think it needs to be said that we will conduct, our government will conduct town meetings throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to address this issue, to bring regularity to this process. Regularity to a process where we have poor Bahamians being disadvantaged, where we have persons who seek to direct foreign investment being disadvantaged. And I could always recall not just that, and not that they're any more important, and they are no more important than Bahamians, but the American embassy, and I was bar president, calling about these things. Large tracts of land that people invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in. Can't get nowhere. Or for the poor people, large tracts of land where their forefathers invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in sweat hours, and can't get anywhere. But we have laid this legislation, Mr. Speaker, to bring clarity to this whole process of land registration. So you see, Mr. Speaker, where we are in Foxhill, in the Lionel Davis allotment that we are about to approve, God willing, pardon? Mr. Lionel Davis was a family man, a community man, a powerful man, a man because of his stance for his people in Foxhill was described as some described my father's unruly and uncontrollable, not because they said anything wrong or did anything wrong. They dared to stand. And posterity is proving well and proving correct in naming this plot of land after a Lionel Davis. Because young people will now ask, who is this man and what did he stand for? And they will associate this man with this historic act that I've just described. And so, Mr. Speaker, in granting this land, I want to assure the Bahamian people that the title is good and marketable. So you don't have to go, as they've done in Linden Estates and a number of other instances, where people pay thousands of dollars and find that they don't have the title to the land. Good and marketable title. The subdivision, there's going to be subdivision approval, Mr. Speaker, where you know that this is something that you could take to the bank. Yes. And Mr. Speaker, we know of many instances where the government has had to go behind developers in order to help poor people and put in light, put in water, the electrical poles, pave the roads, because they did nonsense. And this is an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, where you're seeing the government doing things properly and right. And it's also an educational opportunity as to how we should not do things. Mr. Speaker, I know that at the end of the day, I've been listening over the Christmas holidays, and I've read my rules of the House very closely. And I'm quite certain for this, we're going to have the support of that side opposite to help poor people. Her Majesty's loyal opposition. So all of those things are being corrected, Mr. Speaker. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, and I heard you said it, and I was taught it from I was a young boy. It's a golden opportunity. I don't think there's very little, before this it didn't happen, other than you wanted to get something for free, where young persons can go in, older persons, get a piece of property for less than $30,000. Not just going to be happening in Portville, Carmichael Road, you were in Chippenham, and the Family Island. Everybody's going to get an opportunity to own a piece of the land. But I want, based on our history, Mr. Speaker, and what we have discussed, what I've discussed earlier, we're not entitled. I think sometimes we have to say that. I listened to the prayer. And what are the obligations of the MPs? As a people, our history demonstrated, and it's not just for people of color. I got up this morning, I sent something to my family, and I said, you know, I'm not feeling hot as a rocket this morning. I said, but you know, I went on to say to my family in Cat Island and whoever was in the chat room that, well, one of the things I'm grateful for is that we are the only ones, not the animal, that was given the great charge to conquer and subdue and overcome. I bounced out of my bed. And I said to myself, world, get ready for this black, handsome, sexy man, because he's coming. I know it gets a little funny. But you know why I do that, Mr. Speaker, as an aside, and I'm quite certain...
Honourable Member, I almost rise on a point of order. but I understand your sentiments.
You want Mr. Speaker, in no way am I trying to upstage you. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a reason why I want us to celebrate our blackness. And I put it there, because it's being used as a curse word to disadvantage us. And here you have a prime minister who is seeking, not just seeking, but is bringing regularity to this process. So this process, Mr. Speaker, represents, as I have said before, a recognition of the historical, social, and economic injustices that are being wrought against a country. I'm not going to say a people, a country. And we're seeking to right that by laying the legislation that we have laid, by bringing the Access to Affordable Home Act, by creating a deliverables unit who is actively, and those acts are being sent to the bar. And they're going to go out now and have public discussion to bring this process. Bahamian people, you're not entitled. There was a time when we got together, someone get the food. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence for 2 more minutes.
Granted.
Thank you very much. Someone got the food and you got together on a Saturday. As young police officers, I wish I'd listened to my training sergeant. You can get together now, young professionals. If they're your friends, they should be friends in different ways. Not just to talk nonsense, that you get together, you buy blocks, and you lay those blocks. If I had it to do again, and I do have it to do again, never go to a bank unless it's for the purpose of an investment, a significant investment, not to purchase a home. You could build that. When I was told that, I thought the person who told me I was crazy. You can get together and do it. It has been done. It is being done by our people. And you have that opportunity to get a piece of property that you can own, that has good and marketable title. You can get together and you can build. And if you do decide to go to the bank, just be sensible. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is my profound and distinguished pleasure on behalf of the good people of Yamacraw. And may I say, and I'm not seeking to anything by this, no malintent, and on the people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, to support this resolution. And not from your position, my cousin, as a Cat Islander, to support this resolution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indulge me if you can. I just wanted to get a clearer understanding where the resolution is about 1.2 acres. I was just wondering if the minister or the second of the ministers in here can inform me as to, with this 1.2 acres, how many houses we're planning to put on this property, approximately?
I think you...
10 houses on a... 10 blocks. 10 lots. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so 10 lots on 1.2 acres. Okay. So they're gonna be mighty close to each other.
Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, firstly on behalf of Drew and my mom, Deaconess Lily Mae, and my family, I'd like to extend to the families of Mangrove Key South and the Central Andros in particular, Happy New Year, as we look forward to a productive and a much improved year, one that we'll continue to see a spirit of collegiality and more collaboration in this honorable place. Also, I'd like to say thanks to the leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. Thank you for his confidence reposed in me to lead opposition business, and to my colleagues, the member for Angliston and the member for the Exumas and Ragged Island in his absence, who serves as deputy in our party. Mr. Speaker, so quickly for some housekeeping items, I'll be very brief today, as usual. In life, there is death. We would have had the recent passing and burial of some persons who would have been pretty close to me and my family, by extension. The late Miss Bathsheba Paul, the Bluff South Andros, Miss Curleen Brennan, and the Brennan clan in Bearing Point Andros, the late Irvin Knowles, Emil, a very good friend of ours, former member of Parliament, as we heard earlier, Mr. Charlie Smith, the visionary man behind the own fishing industry, and his son Prescott and Andy and the rest of the family, and also Mr. George Forbes. We call him all of our life Alfred, from Kemps Bay, Florida, and the late Reverend Gerald Forbes' son, and my cousin Marion in Kemps Bay. So today we pray for those families who are saddened, and for their souls, may they rest in eternal peace and rise in glory. And also I can't help but note also the passing of Irma Albury of the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. And those who would have served there, she would have been around for many years to see the development in the broadcasting industry. Persons like Sir Charles Carter, Kelsey Johnson, who serves as ambassador, Carl Bethel, Greg Lumpkin, Mike Smith, Elva Russell Road, Nadine, Cindy Williams, now the member for West, Grand Bahama and Bimini, Donald Pakisha, Obi, many others, Carlton Smith, and the least of them all, yours truly, the hometown boy, the original one. Today, Mr. Speaker, is a very interesting day. And to Ms. Irma Albury's family, our thoughts and our prayers continue to be with you. The land which is being proposed to be conveyed to the Ministry of Housing was a part of a number of parcels of land compulsorily acquired by the government during the time of the late George Markey when he served as Minister of Housing under the PLP in and around 1990. This included the Sugarman Estates, the land on which the community center is now located, and the public spaces in the Eastwood Estates. The land in Roma Street has been followed for some time, and it's been used at various intersections as a dumping ground, and even some would say as a ghost pasture. It was the former Minister of Housing and member for Southern Shores under the past administration, Honorable Ken Dossett, when he served as minister, who proposed to convert this land into a housing estate. It was agreed that it ought to be named after the late Member of Parliament for the great community of Foxhill, Lionel Davis, and be named the Lionel Davis Estate after the first MP for Foxhill. I know the fact, Mr. Speaker, that no action was taken. In the meantime, the community center was built as a gift to the people of Foxhill from the government, and there were negotiations for using the acreage as a parking lot for the center. While waiting for further movement in the housing development part of this project, the member for Foxhill got together with the former member for Southern Shores, the Honorable Ken Dossett, and they thought it fit to have this piece of land used as a community garden, and which for the most part it was used for in sports and at certain events. But the rest is history, Mr. Speaker. The Progressive Liberal Party lost the last elections. The proposal, as I now understand, is being put for service lots at the cost of some $30,000. The PLP, 30 or under, oh, whatever, that's, you can clear it up, I said 30. The PLP has already established its policy position on this, and which is the service lot, for the most part, could not and would not help the larger housing crisis that our people are unable to finance the construction of homes. And after they get these lots through the process that has been so constructed. That is why the government in the housing construction business, that is why the government is in the housing construction business for the most part under the PLP, because it knows it's more cheaper, more efficient, and therefore the prices that would allow, this prices and this structure would allow for single mothers in particular to be able to afford a home. The other issue right now, Mr. Speaker, if one were to visit the Foxhill area, you will see that the density of the population settlement is quite high in that area that we're talking about. And the roads are quite narrow, and the question as to whether or not the attendant traffic problems and additional population density in the area will be conducive to peace and good order in that community, which already has challenges in keeping the peace in everyday life. Not also that the Sugarman Estates down the street, which also was not developed. The PLP in its last months in office, after years of negotiations with the residents who were in traditional occupation of the land, gave title to the people of Foxhill who were in actual occupation of the land and paved the road leading to the estate. Hope that the government will give the folks in the Foxhill community the first priority, Mr. Speaker, to this land, so that the traditional community can be preserved for posterity's sake. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the member for Marathon under whose purview housing falls. And I note the fact that he, in his own way, in a number of instances, spoke directly to the former Prime Minister and the member for Care Island by calling names, not referring to their constituency. I must say that this member, he continues to fly high, and his cape serves him well. His green cape serves him well, nothing personal. But I'm saying there's a level, it might be a practical reality in our society. Mr. Speaker, the issue of housing is one that is very near and dear to me, because it was true government housing that allowed and gave my mom the opportunity to have a house and a place that we can call our own today in McCullough Corner East under the Progressive Liberal Party back in 1982. Mr. Speaker, housing is a very heartfelt issue. When a man has his own house, it makes him feel good. It makes a man or woman feel like a real man or woman, like they own a piece of the rock, a piece of the land. And I think that's why it's important for governments to look at the issue of home ownership, crime fighting, business development, for example, especially in what I call taking a more sectorial approach in these developments. Because what suits New Providence would not suit the Family Islands. In many instances, I think we missed the ball by having what I call this universal approach to doing something that is basically Nassau-centric or New Providence-centric, and afterwards trying to get the Family Islands to fit into the caption. Mr. Speaker, as we look at the subdivision that would be named after the late Lionel Davis, one who served our country well as a patriot, we must note the fact that the younger people are not so inclined to have big space and lots themselves. They would like for governments to look at having what we call condominium kind of concept in housing. They would want smaller families generally. Times are much more challenging. And for safety and security generally, especially unwed or single mothers. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have to look down that line. Mr. Speaker, as we quickly look at this issue of housing, I must note the fact that the member for Marathon gloated and spoke about his government achievements under the member for Kalani. But I would like to know if that member could stand and let us know, in the Bahamian context, how many heads are actually in beds under this principle of land ownership, what we call these disposable lots, with all of the attendant factors and all the accoutrements of persons who could do this and get the exemption here and there. How many persons have actually constructed a home that we can count today in subdivisions under the present administration that we can go to and say, in this subdivision, 20 homes have been constructed, 20 have been... See, at the end of the day, someone might be able to scrap the $30,000 or less dollars to purchase a lot. But Mr. Speaker, if you were to look at a Family Island, for example, if you were to look at Mangrove Key, everything, all the infrastructure is in place already in Mangrove Key and Little Harbor for a subdivision. But if you were to purchase the products or the supplies, pardon me, in New Providence at Kelly's or any of the Hannah's or any of the lumber company in New Providence, then got to take it to the mailboat. And now, for example, you have all these talks about exemptions, but the fact of the matter is the freight costs, purchase costs. Then on top of that, you have all the other issues that comes into play, for example, the contractor, inspectorate, stamp and legal duties, for example. The issue of getting funding through the clearing banks on a daily basis is a big challenge for Bahamian people. And Mr. Speaker, if one were to work through the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, that is another issue that creates a problem for many Bahamians to qualify. Because we've heard the stories on the records there. Mr. Speaker, in my view, I've simply made it known. The PLP's policy works best. The turnkey principle still works. I don't care what we say. Some things could be arranged and maybe adjusted. But the fact of the matter is to ask an unwed or single mother or single families that are challenged. Let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. I know what I'm talking about. I know something in the papers the other day where the governor's now looking at this whole issue with the Japanese cars and imports and to look at assessing this process. I met a family the other day at Arawak Key during these very challenging times. And a man and his wife with 3 children in what I call a small car. When you see 2 full-size persons, maybe a little bigger than I am in them little small little thingum car. But at the end of the day, he knew and he felt, for example, a certain pride with his family to have a car. And I said to he said, you don't know the pride I have, Mr. Forbes. I don't have to be catching a bus to bring my children to the carnival or to go to the fish fry to even get some conch fritters. And what I'm saying at the end of the day, as a government that espouses the view as being the government of the people, and saying the fact that it's the people's time. I am saying as we look at events that are developing around us, such as, for example, maybe revisiting this whole issue of car and imports and Japanese cars imports, and especially housing, Mr. Speaker, when land and its acquisition in New Providence in particular is so costly. I am saying that the government needs to, once again, take a second look at the issue of housing, especially affordable housing for people here in New Providence, especially our young people. Mr. Speaker, I would note the fact that in the communities of Andros, as we are challenged with housing, we have much land. And many times, you talk with young people who might want to return home. I'll be direct with my constituency. And basically, persons are concerned about the infrastructure and what we call suitable accommodations. Water, good potable water, good accommodations, cable television, good telecommunications, Wi-Fi, the list goes on. The fact of the matter is that, as an island boy, this country this morning is still grappling with the issue of unemployment. We saw the report just the other day. And so if you know that situation, for example, is the one that is persistent in our community, in our society, especially here in New Providence. But the family islands, if Nassau is but 10 point something, what 11%? The family islands are even in a rougher position. Mr. Speaker, the reality, Mr. Speaker, is one that the family islands, especially my community, are challenged in no small way. I know the fact that as we talk about housing, I am glad to know that this government would have had the Labor on the Blocks campaign all over New Providence. And we'd anticipated and saying some relief in the numbers of persons who would be unemployed and discouraged. But the reality is, this has not happened. Mr. Speaker, freight costs in the family islands continue to be a challenge to our society. Persons who want to use what they call hackers or chatters at the airport are now being challenged. Just we had the other day a young family wanted to get their family members to New Providence on the plane, were being told that certain criteria were not met. Mr. Speaker, we've got to be conscious of the fact that these times things are very tough. I'm not saying standards should be compromised, but the government must be concerned about the citizens and their well-being. Mr. Speaker, in the main, the heritage communities, what we call the over-the-hill areas, are still waiting for real relief, because we wonder at the end of the day, under the economic zoning and also the attendant bills that were passed, such as the Commercial Enterprise Bill, who they were really passed for. You're wondering whether, for example, whether it was simply what they call a slip-and-go kind of policy for immigration. I told someone the other day, and I was told about it quite candidly at Starbucks. The lady said to me, Mr. Forbes, any given Sunday morning, you go on West Bay Street by Bahama and watch what you would see out there. The amount of persons who are not a part of the Bahamian society directly, who are actually learning to drive in this community and also getting jobs that Bahamians ordinarily have gotten in this community at any given Sunday morning, back to back in these same small cars. And you wonder where they live, where they work, right in New Providence. You know, people can't find jobs. And every time it's easy to focus on the Haitian Bahamians. As a matter of fact, we need to turn this thing around. The Haitians are always the easiest one to be picked on. And I'm challenged by it. I'm challenged by it today. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the member from Yamakon on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not inclined to really want to yield, you know.
He's on a point of order.
Through you.
Honorable member, state the point of order.
Through you, the honorable member for South and Central Andros, a senior man who always gives directions on the rules. He says that the nationality, Haitian population are always the ones to be picked on. Mr. Speaker, this is a country of laws. I'm quite certain, and I say this without any reservation, that the Minister-led government respects the laws and the immigration laws of the Bahamas. And when they're enforced without ill will or any bias to any nationality in the Bahamas. And if that member, sorry for saying that member, if the member for South and Central and Ross is aware of any case, please bring it to the attention, not to my attention.
Or withdraw.
Bring it to the attention of the most honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis. I'm quite certain that it will be dealt with.
Or withdraw.
There are any number of matters before the honorable court. And we respect the court and respect the laws of the Bahamas. But unless he can do that, Mr. Speaker, I will invite the honorable member to withdraw that statement.
Honorable member for Mangrove Key, South and Central.
Mr. Speaker.
Andres, are you prepared to rephrase the statement?
I would rephrase it. I'll simply say, Mr. Speaker, as a senior man in here. In my view, it is my view, in my view, I am saying to you, in my view, that is how I feel. That's my view. I am entitled to my view. And the thing, look here, I'm not talking about this happening just overnight, you know. This has been continuous over the years. That's my view. That's how I feel about it. But there's a new development. I'm saying, what are we accruing? What are the benefits we are accruing as a country under the Commercial Enterprise Bill? Look at it. That's my view. So I'm saying to you, that's how I feel about it. The minister can speak when I'm done. That's how I feel about it, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro. On a point of order.
Speaker, you know, I've always, and I love, admire, and respect the concept of Bahamianization. But there's been no legislation passed in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that recognized the concept of Bahamianization. In that act, that is bringing, and I'm quite certain the member, the Deputy Prime Minister, will highlight very shortly in time to come the benefits from that act. But in that act, Mr. Speaker, the investor, and this is Bahamianization, on coming in has to provide a comprehensive report which underscores the development of Bahamian talent. He must justify on bringing this business that Bahamians are not in and that he's going to develop in the Bahamas, but he must show how he's going to train Bahamians. And you have an opportunity to scrutinize it and to ensure it. I know that the question would be, how do we do it? Right now, we're getting ready to appoint an information commissioner, but we don't need the full enactment of the Freedom of Information Act. That information is fully available for inspection. So to say that there is this through that act, that we're creating an environment where Bahamians are being disadvantaged is totally erroneous. And I'm almost tempted, because of the rules of this House, to say that it is false, but it's an erroneous. And I would invite the honorable member for South and Central and Ross to rephrase that. And unless, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, he can bring cogent evidence or information to the South and lay it on the floor of the South that Bahamians are being disadvantaged by way of that act, I would invite him to withdraw that.
Honorable member for Mangrove Key, South and Central, Andres.
Mr. Speaker, I would like that very same member for Yamakro to reference me in law, where it says that Bahamians, these persons will be trained and everything else that they spoke about just moments ago, and the section and everything else. Show it to me, please, and I'll be glad to withdraw.
No, it's not. It's not in there. It's not in there. Where? Find it. Just said
find it. I'll be glad to withdraw. Find it, please. Mr. Speaker, in the meantime, I would hate to know.
Honorable member. Honorable member.
Yes.
Just find the provision.
The normal procedure in any judicial environment, and this is a quasi-judicial environment, is that if you make an assertion, you have to prove it. You can't call on someone who's challenging you to prove or disprove it.
Mr. Speaker, the member, I made my substantive point. I put my position, and I simply said to the member, if he can find something that bears differently from what I'm saying, he can actually reference. I will withdraw. Until he does that, Mr. Speaker, what am I withdrawing for?
No, honorable member, the procedure, the normal procedure is, if you make an assertion and you are unable to substantiate the assertion, the onus is on you. So if you cannot You cannot say that something does not exist and ask someone else to prove that it doesn't exist.
Mr. Speaker, in all due respect to you, sir, with your leave, I note the fact, and I said, Mr. Speaker, in my view, I said the commercial enterprise does not inure to the benefit of the Bahamian public. That's my view. The member stood up and said what all these other things would happen under the bill. I'm asking if he can prove those things with the training Bahamian so-and-so, to please stand up and withdraw. That's all I ask, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been said several times in this place that as a result of the Commercial Enterprise Act, that there's been 2 companies at least that have established in Grand Bahama alone under the provisions of that act. Those companies have employed or are employing Bahamians. There is I don't want to hazard a guess, but what I recall, it's about 5, 6 maybe, but they were up to 50 employees, and so the point is, Mr. Speaker, just to assure the member that the act has had benefit, and that there are Bahamians who have been employed and are being trained in fields that they would not have ordinarily had an opportunity to be trained in. And so there is early success from that act, and we are confident that with time, and as we further promote the benefits of that act, that there will be even further take-up of the benefits that are included or accrued in that.
Thank you, honorable member.
Speaker, once again, more convoluted. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, I asked the member for Yamacraw to simply get up and say, for example, where it is stated in the law that these things would happen. I didn't change my story. I simply said what I had. I already said. I established that particular point. Mr. Speaker, I move on quickly to wrap things up. Mr. Speaker, we in the Bahamas today are at a unique juncture where Bahamians want to be empowered in the main. They want to feel and be a part of the process. For the people in my community of Andros, they are still waiting for, in Mangofki in particular, I know they are anticipating much. I got the notes. I want to say thanks to those who are listening for the matter on their clinic, and I want to thank the member for Elizabeth for convening at short notice to see us and to allay some concerns. I want to say thanks to you, sir, for your policy in allowing us to come in to see you to discuss this matter. The port of entry is still a very challenging one for...
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, I've just pulled up, and I know the spirit and intent of the attempts of the Speaker to bring online measures so that we could be able to assist by it. But Section 5 speaks to applications before the board. And it says...
Is this the Commercial Enterprises Act?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
It says, every application shall be in the prescribed form as shown in the section schedule and accompanied by a business plan which indicates with specificity the nature of the proposed commercial enterprise, its staffing needs inclusive of the number of work permits which may be required, and such training, for emphasis, Mr. Speaker, and such training and capacity building opportunities as may be agreed to be afforded to Bahamians in respect of positions staffed by work permit holders. And so there must be training, Mr. Speaker.
And there's a renewal period.
And there's a renewal period. So when the intent of the act is when the company comes into the Bahamas, only the major persons like the directing mind and will come in. And so you have to produce a plan for the government to be able to look at. And then for those work permits that you may get, right? And there was that you may get. You have to have a provision in there to show how you will train Bahamians to fill those positions.
That's Bahamianization.
That's Bahamianization, Mr. Speaker. That's what it says. In my humble opinion, that's what it says.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Mangofki. Honorable members.
Bahamianization says if there's a Bahamian, you will not get a word from
Well, that's
what they
no.
say.
This is what this says. This is what it says.
Undermines Bahamianization.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
That's a watered down version.
Honorable member for Yamako, are you still on the point of order?
Mr. Speaker.
Are you still on the point of order, honorable member?
You had a point of privilege, Mr. Speaker. You had a point of privilege.
I'm not going to speak from my seat. I put a position, and I think it's the correct position, Mr. Speaker. And if anybody wants to put a different one, then they can rise, and it edifies and improves the level of debate in the House.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angerson. Are you on a point of order?
On the point of order, but I mean, the member has invited, I think what the member has represented is not what the Bahamianization policy is, Mr. Speaker.
No, honorable member.
Yes,
honorable member. Honorable member. The chair is speaking. What the honorable member for Yamacraw did was to read a section of the Commercial Enterprises Bill.
Yes.
Act rather. He never made any assertion about Bahamianization in reading that excerpt.
I thought I heard him just saying that, so if he's not saying, Speaker.
He read the law.
Speaker, the good thing about it is I have the right to speak, and I will speak when I speak, and Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will speak to that, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a senior man, I would do the honorable thing. I listened to his intent. I always had a good example in this place. I said the intent. The intent was good. But I speak directly to what I said, what the import has been, what the implications have been. Has not been, but I mean, you speak after me, so you could clear that up. I am sticking to my point. Mr. Speaker, in my final few minutes, I still got plenty of time left. I don't have need to withdraw because there's no explicit intent for it to happen.
None.
There was none. None. There was none. I said in my opinion.
He made the point.
I said in my opinion.
No, how you get this?
How you get this?
No. You can't speak. I can't speak. You can't speak.
Honorable members.
No, I'm not yielding. I'm not yielding.
Order. Honorable member. Honorable.
No, Mr. Speaker.
No, I want to too.
Mr. Speaker, it's said.
Honorable member.
You can't talk.
The chair is speaking. Honorable member for Mangrove Key,
yes, Mr.
South and Central Andrews.
Mr. Speaker, let me withdraw. I want to move on. Okay. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, not only is a senior but also an honorable man. I withdraw under one obligation. And I would note the fact that in my view, the Commercial Enterprise Bill has been, for the most part, a disservice to the wider Bahamian society, in my view.
That's right.
That's my view.
The
Commercial Enterprise Bill has been a disservice. And that is and I said in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, it has been a disservice. It has only allowed more immigration and the clearing process to be expedited and fast-tracked for those who want to come into this society. And that's my view. Very strongly held, Mr. View. And I'm going to retract it. Mr. Speaker, I know I'm not mistaken at all, Lord Abaco. Mistaken? I would not follow you on that point today. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is we have a long way to go. And this afternoon, I want to say to the people of my community in Central Andros who are so challenged with the roads in Central Andros from the airport to Bearing Point, the airport repair works that they've been asking for. I know those this afternoon. And also the fact, I know the fact that member for Southern Shores, governance is continuous, my friend. Okay? Governance is continuous. Mr. Speaker, I would have never attacked you as a member for Southern Shores. But you should realize it was just the other day, when the comment came about your ministry and everything else, and many persons castigated you publicly with this rape element. And I was one of those who stood and defended you. I defended you. All right. I wouldn't go no further. I said you could have made a rookie mistake. I defended you. I should be the last one that you should publicly be attacking this place. Mr. Speaker, for generations, the purchase of land and a home has been considered a Bahamian dream. The government, in its wisdom, back in the pending administration, created the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation and other agencies to help younger Bahamians achieve that goal. But we must continually evolve and adapt to meet the demand and changing circumstances of the 21st century Bahamas. We must also educate and protect our people from those who would prey upon them and take advantage of them and their financial challenges. But you and I must also take responsibility, Mr. Speaker, for our actions. Because not because someone wants to lend us money, doesn't mean we should also just go and borrow the money without the ability to repay and then ask others to direct us or to assist us with some relief in these times of challenges. I know the fact we must think outside of the box, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that all Bahamians have an opportunity to own land in our fair country. Through sustainable development that will attract workers and support industries, we must create a shifting in the population to the family islands where there are acres of land for homes to be built, such as Andros. Mr. Speaker, I therefore recommend to the member for Marathon as I take my seat that he would take a second look at the community of Andros and the expediting of the process of home development in New Providence that is already congested. I know the member of St. Anne's would also support him in this gesture. Make sure that he goes down and puts some subdivision in the community of Andros with clear title, as now the land registry is coming into full-fledged. And so at the end of the day, remember for St. Anne's, you have plenty saying what would happen, so I leave it like that. Mr. Speaker,
He's the man.
I know the fact that this is a very ticklish one, and I want to commend the Minister for bringing this forward. And I'm glad that we can have this subdivision named in the honor of the late Mr. Davis. One would have given much. He and George Markey and others, and now the former member, the Honorable Fred Mitchell, and now the present member, the Honorable Chanel, is here for Fox Hill. A great heritage committee, one that we are very proud of. It's anthropology and antecedents and all those who have made so much contribution to our society. It's a part of us. Our food, our folkways, all these things are unique to that community, along with Adelaide and Gambia heritage communities and the inner city communities, what we call now heritage communities. And we are proud when something can happen in communities such as this. I just hope it would have taken a different format. It would have been one that followed the template of the Progressive Liberal Party, one that allowed persons with a turnkey mode to be able to open their front door and walk into their home and wash their dishes and lay in their bed. And I come back, Mr. Speaker, to one closing commentary. The lands and the lots are being sold. The member for West Grand Bahama says she wants some lot and land to be sold in West Grand Bahama also. She wouldn't say it publicly, but I know she wants it. So I feel her heart. East Grand Bahama, oh, you see, East Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, God is a good God. East Grand Bahama asked me to beg on his behalf. So he wants some land in East Grand Bahama too to be laid for him. So I'm saying when he gets in Sweden ski, put some in South End just for God's sake. Mr. Speaker, it's all about being direct. Governance is continuous. We can have some level of levity, but at the end of the day, we must be honest in this process. So we hope to see the young people who are today in the University of the Bahamas, those who are working downtown in the law offices and the super wash and the city markets and the tall drivers and the straw vendors could own homes. We want the everyday Bahamian to be able to own homes. And this government must also continue to come with a program called Mortgage Relief that allows for Bahamian people to remain in their homes that they have right today. So, Mr. Speaker, we must use a holistic approach as I take my seat. And so I am saying, Mr. Speaker, today, in this brand new year, when we hope for much to be accomplished. And as we were told by the president of the Christian Council just a few days ago, let us put our collective hands together and let's build a better Bahamas. And let's move from good to great. And you know we must then go through the city of gold. God bless you, and let's have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central and South Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I thank God for this opportunity once again to be able to stand in this honorable house on behalf of the marvelous people of South and Central Eleuthera. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to convey my deepest condolences to the Anderson's family in Deep Creek on the passing of Mrs. Lolita Anderson, a mother, a sister, an aunt, and of course, she was one of the greatest persons in the community of Deep Creek who lived a great life. She would be remembered in the Free National Movement for the rest of our lives, the role which she and her husband played during the time when the F&M was a curse word in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I also convey my condolences to the family of the late Lambert Farrington, pastor. He was the Reverend Lambert Farrington of St. Stephen's Baptist Church in Hatchet Bay. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Farrington lived a great life. And he also walked by example to every individual in that community. And throughout the island of Eleuthera, the community of Hatchet Bay is mourning the loss of a great man. Mr. Speaker, I also convey my deepest sympathy to the Hall's family in Roxanne on the loss of Mr. Ted Hall, who succumbed to his injuries a few weeks later at Princess Margaret Hospital. And Mr. Speaker, if I may, my good friend, my dear friend, I convey my condolences to Ms. Angela Brown Curvis. Mr. Speaker, I want to pause for a second. I want to just convey to the family of the deceased, Mr. Rodney. Rodney was one individual who visited the Bahamas, who came here and were able to settle down and get married to Ms. Brown. They later on migrated to the island of Eleuthera, where in my constituency, he and his wife, when you saw one, you saw two. He was an individual. When it came to our community, he gave his all and all. He played a great role in the growth and the development of those communities in the island of Eleuthera. Mr. Speaker, he will be missed, and I convey to his family my deepest sympathy. Mr. Speaker, this is just a moment when we reflect, and I want to say to the Ingram's family and to the Honorable Oswald Ingram, former Speaker of this House, and the Deputy Governor General, that we are praying for your speedy recovery. Today he's in hospital here in New Providence. We're praying that God will heal you, because he's the one that will do just that. Mr. Ingram, you are in our prayers. I would like at this time to wish all of South and Central Eleutherians a prosperous new year as we look forward to great things happening in the island of Eleuthera. I am reminded at the beginning of a new year that a blank page represents a time of opportunity to begin again. For many of us, These opportunities bring challenges. We are called to lead in the way through, and we are called to lead the way through a rough sea of confusion and raging winds as we ask to make some hard and unpopular decisions at time in a world as this. Mr. Speaker, our mission remains as God gives us the opportunity to write the most beautiful and best of our pages. Mr. Speaker, the blank page also represents a time of making commitments. Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to the people of this great country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. My government today has written one of the most beautiful pages, which will enrich and enhance the lives of the young and the first-time landowners in the Eastern District of New Providence, more particularly what is known as Fox Hill. Mr. Speaker, the Roman Street area is very historical to us as Bahamians. Today, to be a part of this writing, where young people are given an opportunity to own their own and a piece of the rock through this piece of legislation. Although this legislation before us today, my colleague from Fox Hill, the Honorable Miss Chanel Ferguson, you must be bursting with pride today. And the hard-working people of Fox Hill are now seeing clearly. South and Central supports this resolution and encourages my government on this great accomplishment as we too look forward to this day in our constituency, when our young people will be given the opportunity to have the best pages written, Mr. Speaker. The young and the hard-working people of Governor's Harbor, your best page is about to be written. As my government will write on your blank page the opportunity of owning land within your community that is so very well near and dear to your hearts. A subdivision will be made available to you with all paved roads and utilities in place. I repeat, with all paved roads and utilities in place. Not like the members opposite, who never thought to provide the necessary infrastructure, but first-time landowners. Mr. Speaker, our government remains committed to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Indeed, it is the people's time. Those young persons in Hatchet Bay community, my government remains committed to you, your ownership of land. Your best page is about to be written as well. Like your brothers and sisters in Governor's Harbor, you will be able to own land land that's around your community that remains near and dear to your children, will be affordable to opportunities of remaining close to your Grammy, your aunts, and then, of course, keeping the strong foundation of families alive, rising good and productive citizens in our country. Mr. Speaker, Hatchet Bay has been a community for the last 30 to 40 years, has been crying in the wilderness, a community that has been locked in by land that is owned by the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. And I cried to my government and to the people of this country to free up the land, give the people in Hatchet Bay an opportunity to own a piece of their land.
Amen.
The government has committed that this will take place, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've visited my community in Hatchet Bay many days, and I've sat with some of the elderly folks, and I got the history of that little community, a village that was called Alice Town, Mr. Speaker. That's the real name of Hatchet Bay, Alice Town. And then, of course, we have what we call White Town, Mr. Speaker, where the rich and famous and during the glory days of Hatchet Bay, they lived in those homes, and now we have some of our locals living there. Mr. Speaker, some families has been there for over 25, 30 years. That now is entitled to have title in their hand to call it their home. Mr. Speaker, this F&M government will now provide those persons with those documents.
Speak. Move quickly.
Mr. Speaker, in Saudi Lusra there has been a problem for many decades with the land issuing in Saudi Lusra. Well, when I spoke in this honorable house I told the people of South and Central Luther that the rain was gone, and all the obstacles that stood in their way will be removed. Well, like your brothers and sisters in Governors Harper and Hatchet Bay, you too will have the opportunity to write your best page. Your land issues are being addressed. As we speak, our Attorney General's office is committed to help the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and you, the young people of Roxanne, my plea is that you remain focused and steadfast as we help to write. Mr. Speaker, here again, in Roxanne, there are crown land that's sitting in that community. There are hundreds of acres of crown land, Mr. Speaker. And there are hundreds of acres of commonage, Mr. Speaker, in just about all of the communities in South. But, Mr. Speaker, commonage is good in one place, in one sense. But, Mr. Speaker, when a young man or a young woman can own something that calls their own, that's title, that's ownership. It's a sense of pride, which gives them and those individuals, this is mine. This is my piece of rock. Mr. Speaker, this is what the people have been faced with. And this government is now prepared to do that which is right. Mr. Speaker, we also have a community called Deep Creek at the very end who are faced with a similar situation. Crown lands are sitting there, and our young people haven't had an opportunity to have access to some of this crown land. We're praying that the government will continue to move in the right direction to make sure that our young people are looked after. Mr. Speaker, I now speak about the Bellarmine and John Miller's property. It has been a matter of great pain for those persons concerned for decades, Mr. Speaker. Like the families in Fox Hill, Bellarmine and John Miller's came about through slave plantations. And like today, when my government has perhaps made an unpopular decision in the minds of those opposite, I say again, we remain committed to you, the good people of Bellarmine, John Miller's, and perhaps some neighboring communities. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that is disturbing to not just me, but to the residents of Bellarmine in particular, and the people in the South. On October 15, 2018, the Privy Council, our highest court, handed down a detailed yet clear ruling on the land situation at Southern Luther, to which I previously spoke in this honorable house last year. The decision, in effect, sounded the clarion call for my government, and by extension, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that the corruption, Mr. Speaker, that I speak about, and the member from Yamacross spoke about earlier. Mr. Speaker, there's been a ruling in the Supreme Court in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but yet the people in Southern Luther do not have access to their land. It is wrong. It is entirely wrong when people's inheritance are taken away. We come here and we sit every day and we don't pay attention to the small man on the street who's hurting every day, Mr. Speaker. They've sent me here to represent them. That I will do. Amen. And I will stand and I will speak on behalf of my people. Speak. And I will say that which is right, Mr. Speaker. It is not right, that the inheritance has been taken away from those poor people. Southern Luther has now been in a land situation for the last 30 to 40 years, Mr. Speaker. All because of the rich and famous desire to take what doesn't belong to them. Mr. Speaker, this is unbearable. I call on this nation to stand up. Let's stand together and band together to make sure that these families do not suffer this type of treatment in this country any longer. We said we're going to rule out corruption, but let's just do that. Give the people what is entitled to them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I become very emotional and very passionate when people's rights has been taken away. And we have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, this government and the courts have an opportunity to set the record straight in this country. But what are we doing? Dragging our feet. It's no longer, it's no time. Mr. Speaker, life goes on. We don't know the day or the hour. So now we have an opportunity to do that which is right. Mr. Speaker, and of course, not just in Eleuthera, it goes on throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The person has decided to infringe on the rights of our people. Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity to fix that. I pray that we do. Mr. Speaker, the good people of Southern Central Lutheran, I say to you today, position yourselves. The writing has begun. Your best page is about to be released. My government remains committed to you, the people of Southern Lutheran, and you will be given your rightful ownership. And you too will have your day, like your brothers and sisters in Fox Hill, Governor's Harbor, Roxanne, Hatchet Bay, and all of the dark clouds are disappearing. The rainbow that you've been praying for is about to show. It's going to be a bright, bright sunny day. Your best page is about to be written. Mr. Speaker, just to inform the people of Southern Central Lutheran, I am one who are aware of those concerns. I would like to thank the Minister of Works. As our roads are getting attention, we anticipate the repairs to the dock, both docks in Tarpon Bay, and the construction of the new dock in Roxanne. The chairman of the Water and Sewage Corporation, I want to thank you and the minister. Mr. Chairman, you have restored the water tanks at the naval base, and life is beginning to be better for the people in Central and South with the water supply. I want to thank you and my government. And we made sure that there was no hazardous material used on those water tanks like the previous administration tried to pull on us. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister of Education. Our children are getting to school safely and in a timely manner. Our children are learning in a safe and clean environment. We anticipate the completion of the block at Emma Cooper Primary School, which started as a PTA and a community effort. The Minister of Tourism, thank you for the small repairs to our airport, and I would like to convey to you, Minister of Tourism, that Governor's Harbor Airport is in desperate need of repairs. The condition of that airport really needs some attention. I anticipate that this will happen at the Governor's Harbor Airport shortly. And of course, Roxanne International Airport needs some work as well. Mr. Speaker, we are a proud people. We always try to help ourselves. We always move to show our government how much we appreciate and the pride. Mr. Speaker, God has blessed us with so much. With my government assistance and self-help, we will be well on our way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the Minister of Health for the vehicles that the Ministry of Health now have in the island of Eleuthera. And of course, we can use one more, if possible. Just one more. Mr. Speaker, I'm just gonna take a quick review of my communities, and there are some areas that need some attention. I'm asking my government so that the residents of Eleuthera will know what I've been doing in the last few weeks, and those who haven't been seeing me, I'm on the ground working for you. Mr. Speaker, the graveyard walls in Hatchet Bay and Tarpon Bay and Williamson's Bay and Greencastle need some attention. Roxanne community is a very, very large community which is in desperate need of a graveyard, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if we have space for another 4 or 5 in Roxanne, but we're in desperate need of a graveyard in the Roxanne area. The administration building in Governor's Harbor has been a matter that has been disturbing for quite some years. I'm asking my government if we could do something with that facility. We can use some extra street lights from Hatchet Bay down to Benjamin Town. And the community of Tarpon Bay is asking this government for some assistance in the completion of a building that they started many, many years ago. It's a community center, but they're prepared to utilize it as a gym if the government decides to give us some assistance. And to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, Central and South Eleuthera sporting facilities has been I would say basically almost on disrepair for the last few years. From Bellman Town in the south to Hatchet Bay in the north, Mr. Speaker, our sporting facilities can use some attention. Mr. Speaker, Roxanne is in desperate need of a clinic. Desperate need of a clinic, Mr. Speaker. For many, many years now, Roxanne has had a clinic. They closed it down, and of course, they're now renting a facility, and I am of the view that we need to pay close attention to the condition in which the staff at the Roxanne Clinic works under. Governor's Harbour Clinic also needs some repairs. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I choose to remind my government that the people of Central and Southern Lutheran is not asking for much. And to the Minister of Health, Southern Central awaits at many hospitals. So, Mr. Speaker, Central and Southern Lutheran, like the residents in Fox Hill, are looking forward to the day when our young people will be able to purchase a piece of the rock to call their own. Mr. Speaker, South and Central Lutheran, Madam Fox Hill, we support this bill. Central and South, hold your hand in supporting this bill. And we are looking forward to our glory days and so on. So on order. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Tall Pines.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to rise in this honorable House to speak on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, and by extension, Mr. Speaker, I always say the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, we live in a time in the Bahamas where there is a need, there's a desperate need, Mr. Speaker, for help. We live in the Bahamas where there's a desperate need, not for help in the sense that we're starving, that we're at war, but for help to bring about what some people may misinterpret. Sometimes I think we use this term Bahamanization in the wrong way. Speaker, my interpretation of Bahamanization, if I may interpret it, bring it across as I see it, Bahamanization for me means working together as Bahamans to make things better for Bahamans. And if you look at that definition, I would submit, Mr. Speaker, that what this government has done in the mere year and a half, what this F&M government has a history of doing when in administration, when we look at the direction we continue to move our country, this F&M government has to be seen as a government of true Bahamanization. And this particular resolution, Mr. Speaker, is evidence of that. And so, Mr. Speaker, Tall Pines rise this afternoon to support this resolution because we see it as an important resolution to bringing about the success story in housing that this government intends to tell at the end of this term. Mr. Speaker, I would submit to this House that we're moving in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, just a few months ago, we tabled the Access to Affordable Housing Bill 2018. And it was passed, and we talked about how this government would put in place or would cause to be developed subdivisions or use Crown land and they cause them to be developed for the betterment and the use of Bahamians in our housing policy. And what we've been able to do, Mr. Speaker, is to simply start that process. We've already been able, Mr. Speaker, I think, to build about 20 homes. This particular regulation speaks to another 10 lots, Mr. Speaker. In Fox Hill, a historic community, Mr. Speaker, where we know, and I talk about need, we know that there's a need for housing. We know that there's a need to live the Bahamian dream. And we're simply, Mr. Speaker, moving in that direction and causing it to happen. Mr. Speaker, the ministers already laid down the foundation and presented the resolution and all the legalities involved. But I want to speak to the real substance of this resolution. And the substance of this resolution, Mr. Speaker, is about carrying out a promise that we gave to the Bahamian people. Carrying out a promise that was laid out clearly in our manifesto, Mr. Speaker, and if I may. And I always go back, and as I always say, I always go back to our promises. In our manifesto, Mr. Speaker, one of the things we talked about in land and housing is to continue the regularization of long-term unauthorized, to continue the re-regulation of long-term unauthorized occupation of Crown land for individuals and families, to make available, Mr. Speaker, Crown land to qualified Bahamians at concessionary rate, and to continue the development of new government housing subdivisions to address demands for affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, we promised the Bahamian people this. And today is just evidence of us fulfilling that promise. And so I commend the minister for doing just that. And I commend, and I see my colleague for South Eleuthera commending the member for Fox Hill. But this evidence of F&M government bringing about success of its promises, that's going to be echoed, Mr. Speaker, not only in Fox Hill. The minister has already mentioned that it's going to be echoed in my neck of the woods, in the southwestern part of New Providence, in the Tall Pines area, in the Southern Shores area. Particularly, Mr. Speaker, in the Kambaikal village, which the minister's already indicated that we're looking at 370 lots to be developed, Mr. Speaker. We talked about it being echoed in Abaco. We talked about it being echoed in Andros. We talked about it being echoed in San Salvador. Mr. Speaker, this is evidence that this government is serious about helping its people. This is evidence, Mr. Speaker, about the fact that this government is serious about true Bahamianization. Not the Bahamianization that the PLP like to throw about every now and then when they want to make some people feel bad, Speaker. True Bahamianization as an uplifting Bahamians. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member for South Andros, my very, very good friend, you know, talk about what, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but what a few lots may do. What about, I think he's alluding to the fact that maybe we should build the houses and then give it out or make it available. But I want to remind the member, the senior member, Mr. Speaker, that every dream, every success, it's one of the favorite quotes I give to every speech I give to the young people. Every success begins with a dream. Mr. Speaker, every success begins with a dream. And I say that to South Andros because every Bahamian who is going to be able to take advantage of this opportunity is now dreaming. And that dream, Mr. Speaker, is that property. I remember, Mr. Speaker, when my mother was building her home in Minnesota Road. You know what the first step in that process was, Mr. Speaker? The lot. And anybody would tell you, Mr. Speaker, anything you want to do in life, you have to make that first step. What we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is helping Bahamians make that first step. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member, the member for Manroki, South and Central on this, on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, my point of order is simply this. The member is saying what's his perspective, but my thing is by the same token, I am saying to him, we have a different in our philosophy, Mr. Speaker, so you can't, in this most condemnatory way, speak about my position. Mr. Speaker, he must withdraw, because it's almost a personal assault on me, Mr. Speaker, and I didn't do the same to him.
Honorable member.
Please.
Honorable member. I granted you from the chair your opinion. And
take care of the people in here, man.
I don't see the expressions the expressions of the member for Tall Pines being disparaging in any way to you personally. It's just a different opinion being expressed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why the good member for South Andros always thinks when the good member for Tall Pines speaks and corrects some moves or some sad things said. Mr. Speaker, I was merely saying that his opinion, the good member for South Andros, Mangrove Creek, his opinion is that the government has to always build homes. We're saying that that's not necessarily the approach that has to be taken in order to advance housing policies in the Bahamas. I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, we are being more creative in our approach in helping Bahamians. Speaker, I'm saying that we're making opportunities available for Bahamians who want to live their dream and don't necessarily, if you look at that, Mr. Speaker, might not necessarily like the design of a house in Elizabeth Estate, might not necessarily like a design of a house in Jubilee Gardens. Where, Mr. Speaker, they could go buy a lot at a concessionary rate. I looked at it, Mr. Speaker, the average property in New Providence costing you now $60,000, $70,000. We're doing it under $30,000. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, that might hurt the member for South Andros' feelings because it's being done through an F&M government, but he should be used to that. Great things always happen under F&M governments. And this, Mr. Speaker, is just an example of that. Speaker, when you have lots being provided by the government at under $30,000, and when we have the economy of the Bahamas, as always articulated by the Minister of Finance, the member for East Grand Bahama, where we see moves in the Bahamas economy, that is evident that we are growing, we're moving in the right direction. The benefits of what is being put in place from a fiscal perspective is now being experienced by us. When we look, Mr. Speaker, at the growth in tourism that the Minister of Tourism spoke about with regards, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the growth in tourism, particularly with regards to the stopover visitors, and we know, Mr. Speaker, the stopover visitors are the visitors that we need in the Bahamas. And I'm instructed by the Minister that we've experienced growth, at least from the statistics from September, of over 16%. And I would put it to you, put it to this House, Mr. Speaker, with those continued growth, that we're going to see more and more Bahamians being in the position to take advantage of opportunities that now being had through these types of initiatives and making those properties available. Mr. Speaker, I always say progress, a good economy, a better Bahamas is simply the F&M way. And if members opposite don't want to accept that, I put it to them that when these projects are completed, when Bahamians are in their homes, enjoying their front rooms, as we say in the Bahamas, enjoying their backyards, enjoying their little communities, that's empowerment. That's true Bahamianization. And that's simply the F&M way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was happy to hear the minister responsible and the member for Yamakura spoke about the fact that we're going to move in the direction of encouraging Bahamians as they move in these subdivisions to take advantage of our new policies and renewable energy. Speaker, and I want to encourage him as we move forward in developing these subdivisions to really encourage Bahamians to take advantage of these opportunities. Because I believe that if we begin in our government subdivisions, if we begin in our government offices and departments, if we begin on our government properties, our parks, in terms of solar energy, in terms of any aspects of renewable energy that may be able to assist solar and wind, that's the best way forward. So I was happy to hear, Mr. Speaker, that as we build these lots and as we build the lots throughout the Bahamas, that's going to be an initiative pushed by this government. Mr. Speaker, it's always interesting to hear, and I was happy that that the member, again, I don't mean to He just happened to be the member from the other side who spoke, so I don't want him to jump up. It was interesting to hear him speak about, at least not as yet. Hear the point first. The Commercial Enterprise Act, Mr. Speaker. Again, I don't know if the members, and I say the members, from the side opposite, Her Majesty's loyal opposition. I don't know if the members believe that Rome was built in a day. I think they're smarter than that, Mr. Speaker. They have to be smarter than that because they had 5 years to do certain things, and their records will reflect. If that was their intention, they definitely failed at it. But we have only four downgrades, Mr. Speaker. But it's been a year and a half. And I would think for maybe only a year since the Commercial Enterprise Act was passed. And the good member for East Grand Bahama has already, on the point of order, presented information to this House and to the Bahamas that there have already been evidence of success, even benefits, even in the several months, the short time, Mr. Speaker, at least 2 companies, and I would submit that maybe more, at least 50 Bahamians trained in new industries. Speaker, in you know what new industry is? The benefits of them being trained in new industry means? That means that they were working now in one of these new industries in Grand Bahama. It doesn't take long, Mr. Speaker, given the Bahamians' our ability to be able to build and our creative spirit. In 5 to 10 years, Mr. Speaker, I would guarantee you, those 50 Bahamians trained in new industries, we're going to see a multiplying effect from that, Mr. Speaker. That's going to be astronomical. It's going to be astronomical. And I want to see this good member, if he happens to still be here, be able to eat those words. Mr. Speaker, but I say that to say that because of these types of initiatives, more and more Bahamians will have the opportunity to build homes. More and more Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, will have an opportunity to live the Bahamian dream and to really live the real Bahamianization story, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to also, Mr. Speaker, encourage the member for Southern Luther. I know he loves his community, he loves his constituency, and he's concerned about Bahamians there and their properties. And I want to remind him that this government is committed to land reform. This government is committed to bringing about changes to help Bahamians save their properties. And Mr. Speaker, the member for Yamakroa and the Minister of State for Legal Affairs spoke to that when he talked about, about in 2010, for example, Mr. Speaker, the Ingram administration presented several bills, namely, Mr. Speaker, the Lower Property Bill, the Registration Land Bill, the Land Acquisition Bill. And we have tabled several bills, Mr. Speaker, that will address the issue of modernizing land reform in the Bahamas and all issues relating to land. So I want to assure you, Southern Luther, that this government hears you, that this government feels you, and this government always looks out for Luther, always looks out for Torrey Pines, always looks out for Fox Hill, always looks out for Nassau Village. We look out for the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. And so this resolution, hopefully, and I'm persuaded, I'm encouraged, will cause there to be growth in this country in terms of homes, in terms of modernizing certain aspects of how we approach government land in our country. Speaker, I'm happy to hear that, particularly the subdivision that's proposed to be developed, the Carmichael Village, that there would be sites for parks and sites for and that southwestern area. I know there's a proposed site for a high school or some government school in that area. That we would be able to see those communities, to be able to have beautiful communities, and to be able to help our country as a result of them being comfortable, as a result of them experiencing the Bahamian dream, help develop this country. Mr. Speaker, I know for a fact that good communities results in a better Bahamas. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we've been able to, in Torrey Pines, for example, and I call it an early Christmas gift to my constituents in Torrey Pines, we've been able to build a new park in Victoria Gardens, Mr. Speaker, where there was none before. We was able to build a new park in Straughns Hill, where there was none before. We're able, Mr. Speaker, to build a new park, to redevelop the park in Ophelia Gardens. We've been able to, Mr. Speaker, to almost complete a new park in Doris Johnson Estate.
Honorable member, how much time?
1 more minute, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Carry on, Honorable.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. We're able to develop these parks because we understand the importance of decent communities. And so, Mr. Speaker, this new subdivision in the Fox Hill area will prove to be beneficial not only to Fox Hill, but the entire New Providence. And this policy of the government with regards to building new homes and making land available to Bahamians will prove to be beneficial to this country. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, this member for Torrey Pines supports this resolution and encourages this minister to continue the good work, encourages this government to continue the good work of building a better Bahamas. Torrey Pines supports you, and we support this particular resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, Speaker, I'm sorry. I am reserving for the member for Anglican. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much. Chair, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, we're having an obviously very jovial and collegial time this morning in this honorable place. So, Mr. Speaker, I do move that the House suspends, always trying to protect you, South Andros. But, Mr. Speaker, I do move that the House suspends at this point in time until 3 p.m. for the luncheon break.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend for lunch until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.